Well, in fact, tuning into today's video, I'm going to have a look at the weather for the next week or two today. Trying to pin down this chance of colder weather in the second half of January. Now, it looks like the GFS is backing off from the idea a little bit today. We've got the stratospheric warming going on. I've been talking about in the videos over the last few days. It's not a sudden stratospheric warming. It's not a dramatic warming, but it is quite a significant warming going on over the pole. It could be that the models have been, or GFS anyway, been overreacting to it a little bit over the past few days. So as it's actually happening now, the model is starting to sort of calculate the effects of this. It could be that it's starting to back off from the idea, and that it's not going to be enough really to knock the very strong polar vortex that we've got at the moment, knock it on the head and produce some northern blocking. Now, I think it probably will still turn it a bit colder in the second half of the month, and we may get a drier spell coming up as well. But before that, we've got to concentrate over the next couple of days on the chance of couple of little storms for northern Scotland, and then middle of next week we could be looking at a very significant storm coming in across many parts of the country. Have a look at that in a moment. That could be quite significant, but it's only the GFS showing that at the moment. The ECMWF wants to keep it out in the Atlantic, but midweek next week could be a little bit noteworthy for some very high winds. Have a look at all the charts in a moment. Before I get on with that, just want to say about the ads. There's links to articles on most pages at gaswebbiz.com. Have a browse through widgets. Any articles that you're interested in, please click through. You'll be able to go off and read those articles. There's green keyword ads on some of the pages. If you right cursor over green keywords, they display ads. But if you click through words, you go to advertise website, you support gaswebbiz.com when you do that. And there's weather, yellow weather, contextual related ads on those pages as well. So have a look at what those are about and click through those if you're interested. Thanks so much for getting involved and helping to pay for the website. These things are basically paying for me to sit here and talk to you via the website, so thanks so much for doing that. Going to start off with the stratospheric warming. These are the stratospheric forecast charts from the website meteosteel.fr, and there is a warming going on over the North Pole. The North Pole is just here at the top of the Arctic. The yellow colours here are indicating that we have got some warming taking place over the top of the pole, and particularly around Greenland. Actually, quite unusual to see the warming centred over Greenland, but there it is, quite a significant warming taking place there. If we run through the forecast charts, you can see that this warming continues for a little while longer and becomes a little bit more intense, perhaps, around Greenland and going towards Newfoundland, just here, almost going to the borderline. Red colours, but this isn't the Arctic, this is the North Pole. The North Pole is up over here, so I'm not sure, haven't been sure all the way along really how impactful this is to get the warming centred around Greenland and Newfoundland. I think it would be better really if it's centred right over the top of the pole, but nevertheless there it is around Greenland and Newfoundland. On the 8th of January, a couple of days time, the warming is getting more intense, although by that time already it's starting to cool down. You notice the blue colours are very pale blue colours, but the blue colours are beginning to come back to the top of the pole. So even after a couple of days, it starts cooling down over the North Pole itself. And as we run through, that cooling just continues really over the top of the pole. We keep it warm around the edge, but actually over the pole, the centre of the Arctic there, the colours are coming back towards blue colours. So after a very brief warming really, albeit quite a significant warming, but it's fairly brief. It's not a sudden stratospheric warming. After a couple of days, the cooling begins to take place once again. Although by the time we get through to the 14th, we're perhaps having another little go at trying to generate a bit of a warming once again. But really, I think it's 2 or 3 days of quite warm conditions over top of the pole, and then it cools down as we go beyond that. Now, to see what a sudden stratospheric warming looks like, this is what we was facing on this day in 2013, January the 6th, 2013. And look how much more extensive and intense the colours are there, particularly centred over Siberia and going up in towards the North Pole from that way. Really vibrant colours, reds and oranges, very widely distributed there across the North Pole. That's a proper sudden stratospheric warming, a major warming occurring on this day, the 6th of January 2013. Now, as we run through that, You can see how that warming infiltrates the North Pole, and significantly it stays very warm then for several days. So we're going through to the 11th of January here, for instance, and the warmth is across the whole of the expanse of the pole, really expanse of the pole, from Siberia right over towards Canada. It's very warm, and importantly and crucially, I think it stays warm over the pole for many days, so going on into the 13th, into the 14th. There's no real sign of any cooling, and it was several days after that before it started to cool down again in the stratosphere over North Pole. So that's what a sudden stratospheric warming looks like. Very significant event. Don't think it happens to that extent all that often, but when it does, it can be very impactful. I think for the winter of 2013 it was impactful. The blocking got more and more extreme as the winter went along. After that, culminating in a very, very cold spring, the coldest spring since 1962 or something like that, and the coldest March, of course, in Victorian time. So that's what a sudden stratospheric warming looks like. I think you can clearly see that the warming we've got going on right now, compared to that in 2013, is fairly substantially less, really, what we have going on at the moment. And of course, because it's less of a warming, not as extensive, not as intense, the impacts further down the line are likely to be far less than was the case in 2013. Now, these are the CFS mean forecast 500 millibar height anomaly charts broken down into week periods. These were showing quite a significant cold spell setting up on Sunday. I'm sure you remember. They've sort of toned it down now, though they are still going for a little bit of a colder snap. So the first weekly period takes us from the 6th to the 12th of January. And of course, green here is extrapolating to low pressure, whilst red is extrapolating to high pressure. So for the coming week, we've got low pressure out in the Atlantic, we've got high pressure down to the south, and the flow is generally a westerly, southwesterly. It's a mild flow coming in off the Atlantic, and that's a pretty good representation of weather that we're going to have the rest of this week and into the start of next week. Excuse me. Now, as we run through into the second weekly period, this takes us from the 13th to the 19th of January. We do get a bit of a change through this week. We find that the red colours are becoming more extensive to the north, so they're setting up around Greenland and Iceland. That is a little bit of northern blocking. It's not centred right over top of the pole up here, but it is sort of centred towards Greenland, so it's enough to turn it colder. The trough is being pushed southwards, and the wind flow through that will be going probably northerly, maybe even a little bit northeasterly. So that is enough to turn it colder from the 13th to the 19th of January, with a fair amount of blocking around Greenland, albeit it doesn't really tie back towards proper sort of Arctic northern blocking. But pretty quite a significant change in the pattern there through that weekly period. But it doesn't last long. As we go through to the week of the 20th to the 26th of January, what we're seeing that week is that the blocking is sort of breaking down. It's going off towards Scandinavian, northeastern parts of Europe up there. And the trough is coming back to the south and the southwest of the country. So this is a transitional week, really. The high pressure to the north is sort of being broken down by this low pressure coming up from the south. The wind flow probably starts off southeasterly, which could be cold, but probably ends up southwesterly, which of course turns a great deal milder. So the week of 20th to 26th, things are turning milder after a colder snap of weather. And then we move through into the final weekly period from 27th of January to the 2nd of February, and the heights then are showing that the high pressure, quite intense high pressure, is set up over Scandinavia and go back into western Russia. Deep trough of low pressure in the Atlantic. The wind flow is going back southwesterly, maybe even southerly. Now, we need to keep an eye on this high pressure over Scandinavia because it's very intense. The red colours are very vibrant, so that's a big area of high pressure trying to set up over Scandinavia and western Russia. If that was to take over the pattern, it could swing the winds in from the east and bring us an easterly blast. But up to that point, anyway, 27th to the 2nd of February, it's the Atlantic trough that's dominating, bringing that mild air in. So they're still going for a little bit of a colder spell just after the middle of the month, but it's not as extreme of it as it was on Sunday, and it doesn't doesn't last as long. This is the temperature anomaly forecast graph from the website weatherweb.net. You can find a link to WeatherWeb on my links page that goes with that breakdown, and you can see that it is going for that colder spell, those colder few days. We start off here with a classic sort of zonal sine wave, warm and cold periods alternating, but we get through beyond mid-month. This is 16th of January just here, and there's a definite reduction in the temperatures. It does actually go quite cold. This is 0 Celsius just here, and I think you can see that for a few days temperatures are barely going above freezing as we go to around the 21st, 22nd of January, but we get through to around the 25th, 26th, which is just here, and then the temperatures start to recover. So it's about a week, maybe a little bit more of colder weather that the CFS is seeing, and then we're into, again, a classic sort of zonal sine wave taking us into the start of February with warm and cold sort of temperatures alternating as those areas of low pressure bring most warmer and colder sectors through. But that period from around, say, the 16th through to around the 25th of January, something like that, could be quite a cold period. Certainly probably the coldest period of the month if that was to come off. The GFS, though, which is the cousin of the CFS, the GFS isn't really seeing this. Now, we have got that classic zonal sine wave to start off with, so we've got the warm and cold sectors here all dating. The red line is the 30-year temperature average, of course. We go through to the middle of January, and we do see a reduction in the temperatures. I think there is clearly evidence that the temperatures are reducing into the second half of January, 15th of January being just here. The temperatures are definitely lowering, but they're not becoming particularly cold. There's no real evidence there going into the second half of the chart that it's becoming desperately cold. One or two of the members of the ensemble do become really quite cold, going down to around minus 10 at 850 HK, but you wouldn't look at that and say there's a particularly cold or severely cold weather pattern setting up. So a reduction in temperatures, yes, turning cooler, yes, in the second half of the month, but the GFS is not seeing a proper sort of cold spell at this stage. Also, notice all these rainfall spikes around the middle of next week. That's tied in with the chance of a big storm system that I was talking about a moment ago. After that, with that reduction in the temperature, it should turn drier for a few days. This is the GFS chart for Friday. Quite a deep area of low pressure still forecast to run close to northern Scotland, so it could turn very windy then. And again on Saturday, another deep area of low pressure, though this is being trended northwards all the time. This was forecast to batter northern Scotland on Sunday. Yesterday it was being forecast to batter the Northern Isles. Now it's being taken north up towards Iceland, really, so I'm not sure Saturday is going to be too bad. It'll start off very mild in the south and then turn cooler through the course of the day. But as we run through into the start of next week, we keep that flat westerly flow going with the GFS operation. That takes through into the middle of next week. Now, this is a low pressure that I was talking about through midweek. That could bring us some very significant winds next week. This is Wednesday the 14th of January. Doesn't look much there at 6 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, but just look how that low pressure develops by the end of Wednesday. A very deep storm system bringing severe gales across many parts of the country. There will be a risk of snow on the northern edge of that, and that's for northern England. But of course, the exact track of this low pressure, if it forms, will change. It could be trending northwards, it could be trending southwards, so we need to keep an eye on that. But the main thing is a tightly packed ice path, very windy conditions coming in with that area of low pressure, and then that sweeps off into the North Sea by the time you go through to Thursday the 15th, putting down a severe gale northwesterly. Not particularly cold air, so I don't think we'd have to worry too much about snow, except on the northern edge. But the main thing is those tightly packed ice bars, very, very windy. That low pressure goes off into the 16th, and it's through into the Baltic, leaving us in a cooler northwesterly wind. And instead of setting up that colder spell that the GFS was seeing on Sunday and yesterday, now it wants to run another area of low pressure through and keep relatively mild conditions going into the second half of the month. It does eventually get there with that northerly. This is Thursday the 22nd of January, an incredibly long 384 hours away. Eventually it sets up that northerly with the ridge in the Atlantic, but that's being pushed back, so we can't have great confidence on that. Of course, instead of getting closer as you would expect it to in the second half of the month, it's being pushed back later into the month on the latest GFS, so not great confidence at all on that. The GFS parallel also seeing this storm. There's that little area of low pressure there on Tuesday next week. And this is a little bit further northwards with the storm. So on Wednesday, it's battering Island. Look at those ice bars wrapped around that area of low pressure. That's very, very significant. And it runs it up towards Scotland. So it's England and Wales on the southern side of the low pressure that gets the worst of the winds, with heavy rain driving across the country as well. The low pressure then pulls off into Thursday, the 15th, off in towards the North Sea, leaving us in that cooler northwesterly flow. Now, the position of that low pressure, say, will chop and change. It'll be trended northwards and southwards, but it needs to be kept an eye on because it could be very significant through the middle of next week. The ECM not really seeing it at the moment, though. There is that area of low pressure off the coast of Newfoundland on Tuesday. Doesn't look all that much then. And what the ECM does with it is keeps it in the Atlantic. So on Wednesday, instead of being run in across the British Isles, it's sort of in the central part of the Atlantic, and it's eventually taken up to Iceland, and only really probably grazes northern and western parts of Scotland, perhaps some severe gales, but generally the worst of it is kept out well away from us in the Atlantic. Notice winds are staying mild southwesterly throughout next week with that. Now, it's not far from bringing that storm system in, so just because it's not going for it on this particular run of the ECM doesn't mean we have to forget about it. As long as the GFS is churning out those very extreme wind charts, we've got to keep an eye on it for sure. We go through today 10 with the ECMWF, and we're still in a flat westerly flow, still very deep purple colours tied to Greenland and Iceland, so no real sign of the polar vortex weakening there. We're still locked in to a westerly. Pressure trying to build a little bit over Scandinavia, but there's nothing there really to break us out of that mild westerly pattern anytime soon. So just summing it all up, what we've been looking at, I think the chance of cold weather in the second half of the month is still there, but it's lowering. The chance of it is lowering. The GFS is backing off from it. The CFS is still going for it somewhat, but not as much as it was a couple of days ago. It's all tied in, I think, with this stratospheric warming. The models could well have been overreacting to it. So let's wait and see how it plays out over the next couple of days. But on the face of it today, we're backing off from that chance of cold conditions in the second half of the month. But the main story is probably the risk of a very significant storm through the middle of next week. It's only a risk at the moment, so don't be too alarmed about it. But we do need to keep an eye on it and see where that low pressure is going to be placed through the middle of next week. I'll be keeping you updated, and obviously tomorrow it's a 5-day forecast, so do please come back for that. And well, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.